Okay, I'm ready to get started. So I am Diane Blazek. I am with National Garden Bureau. Welcome to our webinar about seed and plant buying tips from the experts. We do have four experts with us today. We have Tracy, we have Richard, we have Dylan, and we have Meg. So I'm going to let each one of you, I'll call on you one at a time here just to make it easier. But tell us a little bit more about your company and where you're at in terms of the chain of distribution and getting these wonderful seeds and plants to the home gardener. So let's hear. Tracy, we're going to start with you.
Okie doke. Hi, everybody. I'm Tracy Lee Zogby. I am in snowy Western North Carolina right now, but it is beautiful. So I work with Cicada Seed Company. Cicada is a breeder and producer of vegetable and flower seeds and vegetative plant material that is sold through all types of retail distributors, from the big box stores to the mail order catalogs, everywhere in between. So I've been with Cicada for 16 years doing business development. It's my current role. Coming from the retail world, though, at Burpee Catalog, mail order seed catalog in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, and Park Seed Company, also a mail order company in South Carolina. So the home gardeners are who I've worked with and enjoyed my entire 25 plus year career.
Excellent.
So thanks for having me.
Yes, yes. Thank you for being here. Okay, Richard, tell us about you and your companies.
Okay, I represent Young Seed Company in Randolph, Wisconsin. A little cool here today, but we can sit around and think about plants. The company that I own, well, I'm passing on to my kids, but it was started by my grandfather in 1907, and my mother was a Jung, so that's how I get to be in the company. And what we've done over the past 30 years is we've acquired many different catalogs. So Jung is kind of our department store, has a little bit of everything, but the depth of varieties is not as great as the other six catalogs. So Vermont Bean is European varieties and beans. Total tomatoes is like 450 tomato varieties and about 250 pepper varieties. Edmonds Roses introduces a lot of the new hybrid teas, grandifloras and floribundas. Roots and Rhizomes is our perennial catalog. HPS, Horticultural Products and Services, is our wholesale catalog, mainly to market gardeners and small greenhouses. And then Shumways is our heirloom catalog that's printed on newsprint and has been very successful with that. So those are our 8 catalogs, trying to kind of having that department store plus the niche catalogs all the way around that department store catalog.
Excellent. So to say you have a wealth of information in your brain is kind of an understatement.
Yes, I have an undergraduate degree from the UW in Madison, and then I got my master's degree at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York.
Excellent.
And then my PhD from the School of Hard Knocks.
I was just going to say, I think you have a doctorate in a lot of experience there. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, Dylan.
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm Dylan Sedmak. So I work for a company called Pan American Seed. We are a flower and vegetable breeding company. We've been around for a little over 70 years now and really started our focus on flowers way back when the company was started, and later were acquired by Ball Seed shortly after its initiation. And over the last, I'd say, 15 years or so, have opened up our vegetable breeding program. And we really focus our vegetable varieties on, especially for the home gardener. So varieties that'll work in the ground, in the raised bed, and then also working towards container type varieties too. So me personally, I'm based here also in snowy Ohio. I'm a Buckeye through and through. And yeah, I love to garden. Super happy to be here. I love starting plants indoors, outdoors. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the panel.
Awesome. Thank you. And you're a newbie, so you're a first term on our panel, but we will get you inducted very quickly, as we will Meg. And we need to really, really thank Meg. She's filling in for somebody else who was under the weather. So Meg, tell us about yourself and your company.
Sure. I work for Harris Seeds, And I also work for Plant Gem, which is a sister company and subsidiary company of Harris Seeds. And I came on through Plant Gem. Plant Gem is ornamentals, seeds, live plants, spring plants, dahlia tubers, and bare roots rhizomes as well, and fall bulbs. And Harris Seeds is a huge seed distributor that works with a lot of the different companies on this panel. I work with them in the marketing department, and I oversee their home garden catalog. And my background is as a gardener, and I also worked for quite some time in a garden center here in Slower Lower Delaware that had a mission focused on native plants. So I'm here to help with anybody's ornamental, perennial, and cut flower growing questions.
Awesome.
I'm also the trial gardener for Plant Gem.
Excellent. Oh, we love trial gardeners. Okay, and I wanted to point out also that we have Gail Paps from our office. She is posting some helpful links in the chat, the webinar chat. And as we go through here, please, if you have any questions for our panelists, you can put them in chat, you can put them in Q&A. Either way, we will try to get to them. But what we're gonna start with is I always like to ask our panelists, so if you're out at a cocktail party and you're meeting new people and they say, what do you do? And you explain what you do, I'm sure you get a million questions, but what is some of the most frequently asked questions when it comes to how to buy seeds and plants? So I will just open it up to the panel. Anybody can jump in.
So I'll start because this is probably the number one thing I get asked, bar none, is where's the best place to buy? Where's the best place to buy seeds? Where's the best place to buy plants? And I think in addition to people wanting recommendations for specific companies, I think in general, what they're usually asking me is should I buy from only an independent garden center? Is it okay to buy from a big box store? Should I be looking at mail order? Can I buy plants from mail order, or should I only buy seed? And so I'm like, well, I'm not sure what you should do, but I'm going to tell you what I do. I buy from all of those places for different reasons. And I think it's important to remember that, there's a place for all of them, because you've got to look at the variety that everyone, offers, the selection and when that selection is available, the quality, the pricing, the timing. So there's so many layers of things that you're looking at as far as the plant material that you would want to bring into your garden. I think all of those places have a place, and I think it's nice to shop. It's good to shop them all to make sure your garden is well rounded and you're getting, the most opportunity at the best price at the best time, that you can.
Okay, so your advice is a wide breadth of sources, which I love that. That's good. Okay, Richard, what about you? What kind of advice?
Okay, well, we try to have as wide a variety of vegetable, flower seeds, bulbs, perennials, roses, and each of the catalogs that we have has that. We also have 6 garden centers in central Wisconsin area, 3 in Madison, Stoughton, Stevens Point, and Randolph. And so we like garden center buyers and mail order buyers. But we test all of our seeds in our test garden, and we mainly aim our selections at gardeners that have short growing seasons and cold winters. So we try to have the hardy perennials, the hardy fruits, and then the vegetables and flowers and things that you can get in a very quick amount of time, because our season starts in mid-May. Well, our season starts right now, of course, with the mail order, but the planting out season starts in mid-May and then goes probably through the end of September, the beginning of October. And so you have to have varieties and things that have lower maturity times. But, our zone mainly is zone 5 through, whatever. So we are actually a zone 4 or 5 here in Randolph. So And we do produce a lot of the perennials and the shrubs and things that we sell in the catalog. The seeds we buy from Pan Am and Cicada and the other companies that grow seeds. But what we do to make sure that they're good for our gardeners is we have a test garden that we put new varieties into, and we test that against the varieties that we have. So we have new varieties coming into the catalog all the time because that's what people are looking for too. They're not only looking for the tried and true varieties, which Shumway would have, the old heirloom open pollinated varieties, but we like to have the hybrid things. And one of the questions that I get is, how do you determine what variety you use? Well, first you want a notebook and know what you planted last year so that, if it works really well for you, you have that all set up for next year. And then, but if it didn't work for you, try something else and read the description, because the descriptions in the catalogs, although the pictures are there to show you what they are, and we try to be, um, we don't try to Photoshop all of our pictures to make them look as grand and glorious, but we do try to make them look nice, but we try to be realistic in what customers are going to get. And a lot of the pictures that we have are pictures that we do from our test garden. And so, we try to have a selection of things that will work well for people that have short growing seasons and cold climates. And I think between the 5 seed catalogs that we have things, and we have between 4,000 and 5,000 different varieties of flowers and vegetable seeds. So
great, thank you. I like what you were saying about trialing, and I know that a lot of our retail members with National Garden Bureau do have trials. I know, Meg, that you would mention that as well, so that's always good. Speaking of you, Meg, let's go to you. And what's one of the common questions you get?
The most common question I get at a social gathering is, how did I kill my plant? So, but I do occasionally get the, where do I get my plants from? And what's really interesting about this passion and hobby is that most people who are gardeners kind of start at the end game, right? You go to a hardware store like Lowe's or Home Depot, and you buy a plant that is probably in a gallon bucket, and you bring home and you put it in a pot, and you're like, this is great. And then you start working your way backwards. Then you get smaller plants, you start doing more fletchies, do bigger beds, but then you kind of think about bulbs, and then you start thinking about dahlias. And then when you've been gardening for a little while and you've learned a lot, that's when you kind of decide, hey, I'm going to try growing some seeds. So at that point, and I this is a different experience for everyone, obviously, but it's been my experience in this community that that's kind of how it works. You start by just buying a plant, and then you work your way towards sprouting seeds. So if you are at this point where you're like, okay, now I want to try sprouting some seeds, you already know a bit about where to source plants, and you know a bit about where to source maybe bulbs and maybe dahlias, if that's your thing. I'm not a vegetable gardener, so pardon me that if I can't speak to that. But where I learned how to buy seeds is from those parties, and that's just talking to other people. And honestly, a really great source of where you can find about where you want to find different varieties you want to grow is social media. It's a beautiful place. As soon as you get into like Instagram, or if you do TikTok, I'm a little too old for it, but you're going to find people who are constantly talking about new varieties that are coming out that they're excited about, with companies like Floret or Gray Girl Gardens, Dollies. That are people who are small seed breeders, small farmer florists who are sourcing these seeds in different places. And so you're going to find, you get in there and you get all excited. There's, small sunflower breeders and things. And then that's how you try source these. For me, the germination rate is not as important to me as if I get a few of a new plant. And so that is my kind of end game. I don't need 100% perfect or the best germination. I just want to make sure I get a few of this new variety that I want to try.
Thank you. And I did notice that Gail put in our chat is the whole where to buy. We have a list of all of our retail members, of which Richard and Meg are working for 2 of our members. And I want to kind of put a plug in for ourselves if I can, is that all of our retail members do have to provide a letter of reference. That way they're not fly-by-night seed companies, it's like they're actually providing some details that they're buying from reputable firms within the industry, et cetera. And then Meg, you just said something about new varieties. I have to do another plug. Next Friday, I'm doing a webinar all about new varieties from our members. So we have a whole gamut. I think right now we're up to like 187 new varieties for 2025. So if you haven't registered for that, I'm sure Gail will put that, there she is. She put that webinar link in there. So, okay, that's awesome. Dylan, it's time to go to you, and you tell me what one of the most commonly asked questions is.
Yeah, and I figured that one of the most popular ones to answer to would be where to buy seeds. So I actually saved another question I get, because I would say number one is probably, where should I start? And this question actually really pertains as like to those folks who maybe have one season under their belt already of starting seeds. And the question is, okay, I started seeds. I had an okay time, but now I have all these leftover seeds. Can I actually save them to next year? And let me preface this explanation by saying in my past responsibility with Pan American Seed, I worked a lot on the technical end with growers and greenhouses. So professional growers finishing plants, and the same question pops up. So I would say whether you're a home gardener or you are a grower growing for a big box store, this is the same question. So I'm going to give you the secrets that we give to those big growers too, as well as the home gardener. And I guess I'll also preface this with a little anecdote. My grandfather was a horticulturalist, got his degree in horticulture from Ohio State in the 1950s, and I can remember as a kid down in Cincinnati, him telling me, oh, go to my shed, go in this particular shelf, and get out this seed or that seed, and we're going to go start it. And he wouldn't always have the best of luck with that. And I'd like to think that we've come a long way with seed storage since then, and there's some really helpful tips for your own seed if you want to store it till next year. So the first question, as I said, would be, can I carry my seed to the next season? Now, I would say ideally, fresh seed is always going to be best. So buying new seed season over season is kind of the gold standard. But let's just say you got a really rare variety, or maybe you even did some crosses yourself and want to store some seed to the next season. There's a couple tricks. And one of the golden rules we say, besides buying fresh seed, is a balance of relative humidity and temperature. And if you can keep your relative humidity in percentage plus the temperature in Fahrenheit below 100, that is really a good conditions for storing seed. So for example, if I have 30% relative humidity, 40 degrees Fahrenheit in temperature, that's a sum of 70, that's below 100. That's a really nice range to store seed. So for a lot of homeowners, what that would look like would be, say, storing the seed, of course, in a refrigerator if possible throughout the season. Now, the second key there is making sure that you can keep that humidity down, because sometimes those fridges can get a little humid depending on where you put it. So what I like to recommend to people, whether you're a big grower or just a homeowner, is storing them in separate smaller plastic containers, say this big, and even sometimes if you can, putting something that can dry the air down. And that might be something as simple as, say, dry rice that you replace once in a while. The other folks I've mentioned, even just using actually a de-icing agent, like a de-icing salt, like that you would buy, road salt, etc. Those things, putting them in the bottom of a shallow bucket, putting your seed packets on top will keep the humidity down, keep the temperatures in check, and that will really maximize the viability of your seed from one season to the next. So that's a little hot tip I like to give folks, and a question I will get from time to time. So.
Awesome. Thank you. I didn't know that about with the rice, so I'm gonna have to try that. There's a question here on the Q&A that I will answer, and I'm gonna welcome the panelists to come after it. So the question is how do I buy these RHS Chelsea plants, either the RHS, Award of Merit or things you see at Chelsea that seem to be only available in Europe? So my answer to that is, if they're an RHS Award of Merit, they've been trialed in that climate. It is an English climate. They are on an island. If you are not in a similar growing zone as that, then I would not encourage you to try that, because they may not perform as well. That's why we, with All America Selections, we trial all over North America. So when there's a national winner, you know it's going to do well here. There are some AAS winners that are also RHS award winners. So if you're living in North America, I wouldn't rely on the RHS awards, but if they're available here, it means that that breeder or that retailer have trialed them. We've talked about some trials already. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think on my trip to England, I was surprised at what plants would grow in full sunlight, and here they don't do well, and in England they do really well. So yeah, I kind of agree with that, and that's why I think Harris and Young both do quite a bit of testing, so that we aim our products at a certain clientele, the cold, hardy, short season people, and so we try to have plants that will handle our type of an environment. And so we although we do sell seeds in all 48 contiguous states. Our main uh, sales area is the upper Middle West to the East Coast.
Yeah, that's great, because I wanted to now move into a question like, how should I plan? I meaning the home gardener. If I'm gonna, decide what to grow, what do I need to know? And obviously, is your climate, your growing zone, the amount of space you have, the amount of space that these plants will take up. So are there other tips that our panel would suggest of doing your homework before you start your ordering or your shopping list or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I'll jump in here really quick, Diane. So you had mentioned one attribute, and that is how much space you have. So really, really important, I think, to understand. Okay, can I plant stuff in the ground? Do I have a raised bed? Do I only have access to some containers that because I only have a patio or a balcony, etc. And I think knowing your space limitations first is really important, because as you're looking for varieties, you want to make sure that you're selecting varieties that can fit that space. So, for example, if you only have access to, say, maybe a balcony and a patio and these, smaller containers, buying larger, say, indeterminate tomato varieties, while maybe if you're, really skilled and really brave, might work. Generally, there are some alternatives that might work better. So look for words in the descriptions that might say compact, or sometimes determinate, maybe somewhat synonymous with compact. So looking for those traits, and then of course, obviously, if they do provide it on the seed websites, the height also can help be a good attribute to look for too.
Absolutely. Yes. Know your space, and then make sure you read the descriptions about the size, the mature size of that plant. Yeah. Hey, Meg, I wanted to, let's go ahead. Does anybody else have any comments there about what to know before you order?
If nobody else jumps in, I will. With our particular catalogs, when the order comes in, we ship out the seeds and sidelines and the things that can be sent out immediately, the seed starting kits and those sorts of things. But you know, um, with our perennials and bulbs and things like that, we don't send those out until it's planting time, and we do have a pretty sophisticated software package that tells us about the time when people should be planting things. So they can order stuff in January, and the things that can be sent out immediately are sent out, but the green plants, the tomato plants and pepper plants that we sell, we don't send those out until we know that it's time for people to plant them in their gardens, or at least that it's time where they can put them outside to harden them off and then get them ready to go outside. So when it is time to plant, they're there.
That's an excellent tip. I know I hear a lot of industry people talking about, oh my, so I'm in Chicago and I'm zone 5, and there's a warm week in April and you see tomato plants out at a local retailer. And it's like, no, 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 that's not going to do any good. It's planting it too early. So I guess the advice is like I said, know your zone, know when you can plant, trust the retailers to ship at the right time. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think, Richard had already mentioned a journal, and that was that's actually going to be my last piece of advice. Make sure you have a notebook, a journal, whether that's on your phone, whether it's written down anywhere. I think it's pretty important. I know personally, being in this industry for so many years and having early access to so many exciting new things, whether they be, flowers or vegetables, I get excited and start making lists, and the lists become entirely too long. And it's really important up front to sort of write down your parameters, things we talked about, like just summarize your total number of frost-free days in your season, not just like when that last frost date is or when the next first. What's your total growing season, so that you can quickly look at, how long it takes something to mature, and you're going to know, well, that says 110, like mark it off my list, right? And then understanding the basics of everywhere in your garden that you have planned to plant things. What is the lighting? Specifically, not just sun, part shade, or shade, but I have literally stood outside and set myself a timer to walk outside every few hours to understand where the sun's coming from, where it's going, what my house shades when, and how that changes throughout the day. Because the lighting is really important. It's more about shade versus sun. It's about where that light goes, how many hours it's there, and how strong it is at any particular given time. And then having a basic understanding when you start, I think, of what your soil is like, and if you have any specific large pest concerns like deer or bunnies or anything like that, I think will start you off on the right foot. So again, you can take that gigantic long list of things that are exciting and just start marking them off. If you want success, just start with the things that are going to check all the boxes with your lighting, your soil, your pests, your days of maturity, that type of thing. And the other thing that I think is really important to think about up front is think about how much effort you really want to put into something. So, and what your end use is going to be. So talking about, flowers, for example, if you want beautiful vases of cut flowers, every week, like really think about what that means for how much you have to plant in a garden and how much care that's going to take. Versus, are you going to be happy to buy a bouquet from your farmer's market once a week and then pick a bouquet out of your garden, 1 week? And then the same thing with vegetables. Do you want a can? Are you feeding a family of 4? A good example for me is in the industry, I am at trial gardens and I am visiting trials the entire month of August. I may be home 2 days in August. That's whenever, that's when everything's ready, right? So I no longer plant tomatoes and peppers. It kills me to say that, but I am gone when they're ripe and need to be picked. So thinking ahead, I wasted 3 years saying, why did I plant that? I'm not here to pick it. So understanding the effort you're able to put into it up front too will help you narrow down the choices, I think.
Right, your effort, your lifestyle, because I'm the same way. We travel a lot in the summer, and so the amount that you can water in the summer, and you're right, are you going to be there to harvest? So here's my secret tip: teach your husband how to oven dry tomatoes.
Yeah, that has I tried that. That didn't work for me.
Successful thing I've ever done. So, Tracy, you brought up something, and I want to ask Meg about this. And this is succession planting. So when you're placing your seed orders, think about succession planting, important for greens, maybe herbs, definitely cut flowers. So who wants to talk a little bit about succession planting?
That's an organization level that I have never successfully breached. I will say that I live in a vacation town, so the majority of the people who are here in the summertime, and they love to plant camellia bushes and peonies, and I love to go around the neighborhood and pick all of their flowers because they are not here. And I just wanted to to tag on to what Tracy was saying about making your decisions based on what your ability, how much work you are willing to put into things. And this is where I always kind of put in a plug for, especially talking about ornamentals again. I am a flower gardener, is that going with native plants is what I so often recommend to folks when they're saying, well, what should I plant here? And I'm like, well, how much effort can you put in? And they're like, literally zero. And I say, then you need to plant a plant that can take care of itself. Versus people who are like, I just really want to get into things. That's when you can take a plant that is, doing well in England and bring it to Arizona and do your very best to mimic that environment for them. So I think that knowing that you can either plant a plant that is in its own native environment, or you have to put in all the work to mimic that native environment is something to consider. For succession planting, I have done that with bulbs, and I find that it is always it's so hard to get right. It's something that takes a lot of practice, and you have to be prepared to roll with the punches of Mother Nature, especially where I am in Delaware, where we are borderlining on maybe going to be zone 8. Maybe we already are. Spring and summer keeps on coming earlier and earlier. I have daffodils sprouting right now underneath the snow. So I will pass on that one, and I'll let somebody else speak to that.
Well, like again, I will just add on that, not a lot of detail, but this is where the journal is imperative, right? So it's hard. I agree. I've also tried it and also had limited success, but that's speaks more to my inattention and maybe ADD and travel and all that other stuff. But I think you need to spend a lot of time watching the weather for that year versus the weather from past years, keeping records, and that type of thing, because that's a lot of time and effort, in my opinion, put into something. Although when you're looking at something like, I take that back, because I'll do it with something like salad greens, that's very easy. If you look at something that that you're going to use every few weeks, and it's a fast grower, and that you can direct sow seeds for, say for instance, or even some herbs, then I will designate areas in my raised bed or in the ground or in containers for salad greens every season. And so I know that within that cool season, when they do best, I can direct sow enough to have several salads, every week for the next 8 weeks, say. And so taking like 1 or 2 crops in a chunk that you're going to grow everything the same way, and you know exactly what you need and what you want. I think that's sort of the easiest, best way to dip your toe into it. And that kind of sort of a no-brainer, except that you need to know when to start and when to finish. Like, I'm not going to keep succession planting, salad greens, direct sowing them every week or 2 weeks, for 16 weeks, because it's going to get too hot. It's not going to work. So start easy. Salad greens, baby leaf greens are the best thing to do with.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize what Tracy said. I think there's a really, to that extent with succession planning, there's a really nice opportunity for those, especially those cool season crops, but these direct sow type crops. So again, most of those are going to be the cool season. Even some cucurbits, some summer squashes and cucumbers can fruit very quickly from direct seed. So, if you planted everything and you're like, hey, I still have some space left, or, I've still got maybe a month and a half left before the season ends. Is there anything I can do? Those direct sow quicker crops can really provide a nice opportunity for a bumper crop later in the season.
Yeah, I also saw that when you said that, it reminded me of zucchini, right? Like, everybody's passing around baseball bat zucchinis to their neighbors, because you can only eat so many zucchini. So that's the perfect thing to do. Plant one or 2 maybe plants, and then wait a month, because they're really fast to maturity. They're direct sow. You get plenty per plant, so you don't need very many. So that's another dip your toe in it easy thing to succession sow.
So I can handle the succession planting with vegetables, okay? I think it depends on what your end goal is. If you are just planting for fresh, planting snap beans every 2 weeks, not planting a whole bunch of them at one time, but just planting a short row, and then 2 weeks later planting another short row. It depends on how big your garden is also. Sweet corn, you can succession plan that, or you can use different maturities. So if you want sweet corn over the whole season, you plant the early varieties, the mid-season varieties, and then the slower maturing varieties, so that you can pick sweet corn throughout the whole season rather than just having one variety where it all comes on at one time. So, yeah, there are some really good things. I've been taking up raised bed gardens, and I love that. Boy, the plants really grow very well in it. But you wouldn't use a raised bed garden for corn or some of the bigger vegetables. But for the cool season crops like broccoli and some of those, you can have broccoli all season long, and you cut the king head out, and then the side branches come on. So yeah, you can do a lot with your garden. And there again, the having a journal and kind of keeping track of when you planted and how much you planted and how much came out of it, and you can kind of keep track of how much you want at a certain time.
Yeah, I think keeping track of everything is very, very key. And for all of us, I think we can agree it's kind of like a science experiment. We learn every year from what we've done. So that's really good. And also kudos to all of the retailers. The information you're providing on the varieties is so helpful. I mean, if you weren't designating your sweet corn as being an early or a late season, or if you weren't providing days to maturity, that's very important to look at. Dick was talking about cool season, shorter seasons. You have a lot shorter time frame. And I know with a lot of the new things that are being developed, the new varieties, a lot of the things we're going for is early maturity, either because we want people in the north to be able to grow, or we're also anxious to get that first tomato. So if we can shorten up that maturity date, which I know the breeders are working on, they do that. But let's talk a little bit more about all the choices. I mean, if I were to look right now at any one website at tomatoes, and there's 80, 90, 100 different varieties, and I'm new to this, maybe last year I just bought a generic beefsteak tomato plant, but I'm maturing as a gardener and I want to refine my choices. How do I decide? There's so many varieties.
Okay, well, I'll take that one on first because you talk about tomatoes. There are literally thousands of varieties of tomatoes, and one of our catalogs happens to be Totally Tomatoes, which has about 450 varieties of tomatoes. And here you have to figure out, number one, whether you want to use an open pollinated variety or whether you want to use a hybrid variety. Hybrid varieties are going to be very uniform. They're going to grow faster. They're probably going to have bigger fruits, but a lot of people like those old OPs like Brandywine or Mortgage Lifter. Um, Same way with the peppers. There are a lot of new varieties of peppers, and some of them are very hot, and some of them are very nice and mild, and some of them are very sweet. And then you get all the different colors, and then you get the lunchbox peppers, where you can get different colors, and the very small ones where you just pick one up and 2 bites, it's gone. So you have to read the descriptions as well as look at the pretty pictures because that's where you're going to find out, how big the fruits are going to be, whether it's a variety that you use for canning or whether it's one that you use for slicing or for the different purposes that you have. A salad tomato, the color of the tomato, it's just a myriad of different things, and it's the same way all the way through the vegetable world that the breeders are coming out with all these new things that are um, almost a wow factor. So that's what I have to say. Read the description. Ask your neighbors. It's a good way of starting a conversation with the community in your area. Join a garden club because they'll have a lot of people that have been gardening for years and they'll know what varieties do well in your climate. So, there are a lot of resources available. So I'll shut up and let somebody else talk.
My answer is similar to what we were talking about before, which is really like backing it back into, the criteria that you have so that you can reduce the selection. So go wild, look at all the things that excite you. then start marking things off your list, because what's going to fit in this box and what isn't. And then what you've got left, then you have to think about perhaps like, okay, well, what can I actually use in the space, going back to the space that you actually have, right? I have a yard that's right now can fit 3 to 7 perennials. So just don't pick 10 perennials. Try to pick 3 this year that look like exciting ones for you. I have room. I have a 4 by 12 foot area that I can fit annuals in this year. Okay, well, I don't want 6 different kinds. I want to make a bed with 3 pops of color. So let's narrow that down to 3. So backing 3 varieties into that. I have 6 containers that I want to make a big display of. So if I want them mixed, start looking at, how many plants I want in that container, how I want to mix that up with color and texture, and back in your choices into that. So to me, it's just really about narrowing everything down based on what your true criteria are, so that you'll have the best success. And then keep a running list in your journal of all those things you didn't pick for when you have room to slot them in.
Yeah, and I've got one more too. And one of my favorite things to do, and I did in my past life, are variety trials. And I think we're already on a National Garden Bureau panel. And I think one just to highlight right off the bat, of course, is AAS. And with the All American selections, they do an excellent job of doing trials of varieties, not just in one location geographically, but across the United States from east to west. So that's a really great place to start. If you are going in blind and you're really unsure, not confident, it's like those are some of the tried and true that you can rely on in a fairly wide geographical range. Especially for some of those vegetables and annuals. And when it comes to perennials, and I have a very soft spot in my heart for perennials as well. I actually think there's a lot of value in looking at, there's some really easy to read trial reports from some of the botanical gardens in the United States. For example, Chicago Botanical Garden, or Longwood or Mount Cuba Botanical Garden. They do a really great job with perennial trial reports of both native and non-native hybrids of perennials. So, using resources like that. And then the last resource I'd mention on trials, if you are so inclined, is, the land grant universities in particular do a very good job at trialing varieties. And I think that they've done a great job more recently too, making these trial reports very accessible and easily readable. So, even me, what I'll do is I'll just go on Google or something and just literally type in, say, tomato trial, and then, whatever university, or I'll just type in tomato trial university. And usually your first search results will be a lot of these land grants and, a beefsteak tomato trial. So that's also a nice way to get a more local view on successful varieties, because of course they're trialing more locally for that region. So yeah, trials.
That's a good. Oh, thank you for the AAS plug. That's true. You mentioned land grants. You mentioned public gardens. Absolutely, a lot of them are our trial sites. And I mentioned that I'm in Chicago, so of course I'm going to go to Chicago Botanic Garden and see what does well there. I'm not going to go to the Tucson Botanical Garden and see what grows there. So you have to keep in mind the trials that are in your area. So yeah, if you can find a university or a public garden or anything else that might be open to the public, that's a great place. Now, what you may be seeing is pre-release trials. So that's what you need to understand also, is if you're visiting a trial site and it has Marigold XYZ00149, that means it's not commercial yet. That's an internal code for that variety. So just educate yourself on what you're seeing and if it's available. For us, for AAS winners, once they've been announced, they're available. So that's, as Dylan said, that's a really good place. And if it's a national winner, that means it has performed well all over the US and Canada. But we also have regional winners, especially with perennials and vegetables. They're very regional specific. It's why we have regional cuisines, and so certain things just naturally grow better in certain areas. So we've started to designate that regionality as well. So
I would agree with that, and even add, Diane, that trials are a great resource. And sometimes I get really excited when I see things in trials that I want to put something in my own garden. And even if it's not experimental and it is, quote, commercial already and available, that doesn't necessarily mean we can find it or find it easily. And so I think that's goes back to one of my original most asked question of, where should I go to get stuff? In instances like that, I think that's where mail order shines, because you will often find mail order both plants and seeds. These newer things that you would see in trial gardens available more often and sooner in those avenues than you would, a physical store most of the time. And then after that, I think it's important to speak up and whatever independent garden center or garden center that you like to purchase from, ask them for it, because they don't necessarily know, or perhaps you're going to be the 12th person that asks. And so then finally it will be available. So that's the struggle I have, is I see things that are supposedly available, but I still can't find them. So it's just a matter of utilizing online retailers at that point and asking your local people to carry it.
I agree completely. As the person I managed a garden center for a long time, and people would come up to me and be like, "Do you carry X plant?" And I'd say, "No, but I will." Garden centers want to carry what people want to buy. So if you speak up, if it's a good garden center, they're going to do everything they can to source that. There's most garden centers source from all over their region, and maybe even the country. So they're going to do their research. I did the research to find the plants that people wanted. And 9 times out of 10, that one person was not alone. A lot of people wanted that. But I 100% agree as well. I feel like I have this dichotomy of that. I'm like, go native, support your local garden center. But also, that was a part of me that, did work at the local garden center, really pushed those native plants, really promoted the biodiversity. It's good for your pollinators. It's good for the environment. It's, gonna like create a sustainable, biodiversity for the future. However, there's a whole other part of me that's like, I just want to stop traffic with my garden. I want to make everybody want to like stop and talk to me about my garden, which it's always a point of pride when they do. And that's where Plant Gem is. Like, I love curating the plants at Plant Gem. I'm shopping for my own garden as I create the catalog for Plant Gem, because I want to have all the kinds of interesting plants that you only see in bouquets through a florist. I want to grow those, and I want to be able to give them to my neighbors the same way that other people give out their cucumbers. So there are companies like Plant Gem, of course. We do live plants, we do seeds that you can get Lysianthus, and you can get anemones, and you can get ranunculus, and you can get crazy colored snapdragons. And that's, the different kinds of plants that you just don't find at Lowe's. You don't find them at box stores. And, if that's your goal, is that you want to just stand out from those red geraniums and the same pink vinca you see everywhere, and the same Senator begonias everywhere, like, if that's what you want to do, then you're going to have a lot of fun shopping online for that kind of thing. But what I would say is, those plants are going to be small. You don't frequently get, usually you're going to get like just above plug size. So be prepared to play the long game and plant accordingly, because most annuals, they're going to grow, they're going to get much bigger over the season. But you're not going to get that perfect garden that you can sometimes assemble when you go to a garden center and get things in quart sizes. But yeah, I also wanted to say that if you are a perennial person and you want to start with seed and you have a lot of space and you don't know where to start, wildflower seed is a great way to start, is to spread a lot of wildflower seed that is a mix of annual and perennial. And you're going to get a kind of a crazy mix to begin with, but what you'll get is the beginnings of a perennial garden that you can build on afterwards. And I have done that with the public space that's in the front of my property, that it's like kind of like a drainage swale, and I cleared it all out and laid down a whole bunch of wildflower seed. And the perennial, it was a great year for annuals and perennials. The perennials established themselves, and a lot of other native plants have come in and joined these perennials. So that is kind of a hack if you're trying to have an affordable and quick and easy perennial garden.
So it's I'm glad you brought that up about wildflowers, because we had a webinar not too long ago, and we wanted to really make a point when you're looking at wildflowers is know your region. And there are a lot of different mixes. I know a lot of the different retailers offer, this mix for the mountain region and this mix for the southeast region, et cetera. So again, don't try to rock the boat. Buy something that you know is going to work well in your area and your region, because otherwise you won't be as successful. So I got another question. In fact, we're going to do a whole webinar on this, but I thought we could slightly touch on this. So let's say that no offense to geraniums, let's say that I've been growing the same red geranium for the past 10 years and it's no longer available. So why might a variety no longer be available? And how do I go about finding something else?
Usually when something disappears from the market, it has something it's been replaced with. And so there's something new out there that is going to take its place. And so you've got to do some homework and see once, if it's from a garden center. If we drop something in one of our garden centers and people have been looking for it, we try to have something that's similar or better to replace it with, and that way you have customers coming back to you year after year. And sometimes it'll start having disease problems, and depending on whether it's a clonal geranium or whatever, they sometimes will develop disease or insect problems that you don't want to spread. So, usually when something disappears, there's something better behind it. At least
Yeah.
that's my experience.
Yeah, and I would add too that, I think in horticulture and in gardening in general, it's just one of those hobbies where, you can get really attached to a variety, or I would say there's a lot of name recognition around varieties. And, rightfully so. We've got, again, in vegetables as an example, lots of heirlooms with names that have been passed down for generations of tried and true, delicious tasting beefsteaks. But if you can't necessarily find those at, say, at your local garden center, don't let that dissuade you from trying out new varieties. Because I would say, from a breeding perspective, the varieties have come quite a long way. So you can still get some of that, say, again, on vegetables, as an example, that heirloom flavor, that heirloom appearance, but maybe with added disease resistance or more yield, or a habit that fits better for your garden. So, again, name recognition is great, but don't be afraid to dip your toes in newer waters.
Yeah, I think open-mindedness is key. I think we often within the industry, right? We know all of the wonderful things that are being developed and are available for the reasons everybody has spoken of that may have advantages over some well-recognized or very well-loved older varieties. But I think it's important to recognize that there's a behind the scenes work going on, and in the end all these people in this industry are working for you, the end consumer, to bring to you what's going to work best for you and what you will be successful with, and that we think you will end up loving just as much or more so than those old favorites. And I think the other thing too that we often say, we often sit around when we're looking at how to introduce a new variety or how to talk to our retailers about, why it would be good to offer a new variety, is that we say, we've got to get past the name recognition of the older variety just once. All they have to do is pick up that plant or sow that seed just once. And if they can do it just once and they see the results that they get, then all of a sudden, name recognition may not be so important. And they're like, oh, okay, I do have room for something that's just as wonderful or maybe even better. So please have an open mind. Oh, and let me add something else too. I'm sorry, I forgot about this. Sometimes things not being available are cyclical. It might not be permanent. So always another thing to always ask about is, production of in flowers and vegetables in this world, they're live beings and things don't always work out. And sometimes things aren't available because there were crop failures or, diseases that came in and wiped out, crops that will then, be used to produce plants. And so it's important to ask, like, was this a one-off? I always tell my family over the holidays what's going to be hard to find the next year. And remember a couple of years ago, it was like, I'm in the South, right? So I told all my relatives at Thanksgiving, collards are short this year. So you better find your collards now for New Year's because they're going to be impossible to find in the grocery store. And that's just a one-off year because we had crop failures in collards. So that's an example of, again, asking the question, asking the experts, asking the people at the garden centers.
Attending the webinars, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. We are almost out of time already, and I'm going to throw a little curveball at my panelists. We've talked a lot about seed. We haven't talked a lot about buying plants. So we've all bought them. And so let's have a closing tip from each of you when you're buying plants, either online or in the store. What is your one key tip when buying actual plants instead of seeds?
Okay, well, you can't say one, right? My one key tip are these three things. So when I buy plants, I'm going to squeeze the garden center owners might not like to hear this, but I'm going to squeeze the pot a little bit. I'm going to look at it just enough to know if that pot is root bound and what the roots look like on that plant. That's my number one. And then my number two within that is, don't always assume that because a plant is sitting out at a garden center that it's the right time for you to buy it and plant it. I think that's one of my giant pet peeves is when I go somewhere and I see, it's July and August in Philadelphia and I see Calibrachoa on the shelf, things like that. Then I'm like, no, why is this here? This should not be here. It's beautiful. It's in bloom, but nobody should be buying this right this minute and putting it in their garden. So just be cautious and careful and ask questions and check the roots.
Excellent. Who else?
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Dick.
Okay, I'm sorry. On the mail order side, you kind of have to trust the reputation of the company that you're buying from because and how they stand behind them, because we ship literally hundreds of thousands of green plants through the mail, and we're not always in control of how fast the delivery services get their plants to you. And so we are very generous with our customer service. So if somebody gets a plant that's either been mangled in the mail or has been in the mail too long, we reship. So you've gotta know the people that are behind the plants that you're buying from and know their reputation, and if you've been buying from them for years, you go back to them.
Good tips.
Yeah, and I would definitely echo what Tracy said. I think probably my number one is going to be to look at the roots of a plant. That's always, I think, going to be really key because sometimes you'll find plants that look great on top and the roots tell another story. And I think it should be fairly, I think, obvious when you see some bad roots. They're not necessarily white or that beige color they usually are. They might be brown or black or not even there. So definitely check the roots. And then another hot tip on the perennial side, because this is what I do. Is in later in the season or late summer or fall, if you still have that itch to plant and the season's a little short, you can, depending on your zone, of course, depending on the plant, you can still plant perennials. And sometimes at those local garden centers, they're on sale because they don't look great in the top. I mean, I think most people might see them and be like, wow, that's dead. I'm not going to waste, even $7 on that. But don't be afraid, right? Take that plant out of the pot, look at the roots. There might be an opportunity to get a good deal on planting some stuff in the fall to have something looking really good next season. So those are a couple of my tips.
That's a good point. And that even happens at the big box stores. I am known for going and finding that one rack where they've already pulled everything off because it looks horrible. But in fact, some of the perennials are still quite good to plant. So
yeah, perennials
adopting a rescue. Very good. Always adopt a rescue plant from garden centers.
Yeah, plants are not stupid. That when it starts to get the season starts to get towards fall, they're getting ready for winter, and so
That's
you
right.
know, in the garden centers we do put things on sale, but even doing a little bit of care with them, covering them, giving them a good mulch after the soil is cold will have many rewards in the next spring or
Excellent.
summer.
Okay, Meg, you have the last quick tip
Yes.
about buying plants.
Buy things in sets of 3s and 4s. One thing that would always make me nuts and would make me run over to someone's cart if they had a cart full of one of everything. Your
Totally
garden
agree.
can look very strange if you just have one of everything. Buy things in sets of 3s and 4s.
I love it. Yes,
Yep.
I'm the same way. Try not to get too nosy on anybody's cart, but yeah, it'll look much better if you have them in multiples, especially multiples of odd, right? A design tip. So, okay, everybody, this was wonderful. Yep, I'm going online. I'm going to start ordering now. So we've sparked it. Okay, so thank you, everybody. Great way to wrap up a Friday afternoon, and enjoy the weekend and start planning your garden.